So I think I'll kick off the panel discussion, maybe with a question or two. Really, I want to open it up to the audience. You guys have all the insightful questions. So where to start? Well, actually, the first thing I'd like to, I think we've got a good demographic here. We've got people representing investors. We have an analyst and researcher here, and we also have a budding, well, actually more than a budding entrepreneur. So the question I'd like to ask, first of all, is if you guys were starting up, again, from today, what would be the tech trend that you guys would be looking to jump on top of? So let's start.
Probably from a VC's point of view, it'd be quite interesting.
I can tell you, maybe an obvious trend, but I think one that still continues to be pretty profound, and I continue to grasp about its magnitude is exactly what you talked about the shift to mobile and mobile devices. You know, we see in most of the startups who started in the online world, 50% plus traffic now coming from mobile devices, mobile phones, tablets, and it has really happened, in overnight, almost. So I hosted a dinner for e-commerce entrepreneurs here in Europe last May, and of 12 successful e-commerce startups, 0 had a native mobile app. And none of the CEOs has raised it as a top 3 priority, given all the things that they had to do, and here, obviously mobile web plays a big role as well. And so, but today, I mean, it's just hard to imagine that the same group of people would come up with anything close to that answer. And so what we have seen is something that started as a cottage industry in around the Apple App Store has spawned $1 billion worth of value, in companies like Supercell, which, by the way, in 2011 was a startup without a product. And that the fact that it's worth $3 billion today just shows you the magnitude of how fast the deployment can happen in this global world where everyone is connected to a mobile device.
So yeah, I think I probably would do what we're doing now at the moment. I think the future is mobile. With everyone moving to mobile phones, Facebook said the other day 50% of the revenue comes from mobile. Hopefully will be sort of the next evolution in mobile is wearable technology on sort of people's heads. I think it's what Google are doing at the moment is they're doing a project where you can still maintain that human contact, but also still have the information to get when you need it, which is really interesting. I think there will be redesigns and there'll be evolutions. There'll be some skeptics, but I think it will be evolving, and I think headsets will be the way forward. So that's why we're kind of in the space.
Staying on the theme of mobile, I would slightly question some of the enthusiasm for mobile per se, because a lot of what's described as mobile is actually tablets, which is mostly indoor usage. And that's where I'd focus, is actually indoor connectivity. The more devices that we have, and because the price point's keeping going down, the more strain that puts on the networks which we're using. So if you go around here, there is a lot of connectivity, but a lot of it you can't access. And there is a role for an aggregator to try and make all that connectivity work together in a seamless way for those who want to pay for it. So every device that comes out, given Moore's law, sucks up more bandwidth. And if you look at your homes, you probably have double the number of devices that you had about 3 years ago. You're going to have to look at solutions to try and make the high-speed bandwidth going into your home work better for you. And bandwidth itself is just so tricky. And I think we haven't seen, as we've seen lots of the opportunity, but we haven't seen the full brunt of the complexity of making connectivity work for all the devices we want to make work. So when you talk about Google Glass, say running in Hyde Park, when there are lots of people, it won't work because of connectivity issues. So you need to work out how you engineer the solution so it can work. We talk about, who is it now? LTE Advanced is coming probably next year. Yet if you go outside of the M25, you will struggle to get even GPRS. So that's reality. One of the realities of mobile connectivity is that it works great in some places and it's pretty awful in others. And if you use, say, Everything Everywhere's network, using 4G going from here to here, you'll lose about 10 megabits per second. So that's the impact of mobile networks. So they're fantastic, but they are also flawed, and there's an opportunity.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't seen it from that perspective. I mean, certainly we see the same trends. I mean, mobile first always, but it's really, really interesting to take the perspective that we take for granted that we have connectivity everywhere, and evidently we don't, and there's the opportunity to aggregate and pull that together. Maybe shifting gears a little bit and talking about startups themselves. So I think each of you touched upon some of the trends that we're seeing within startups in the UK and in Europe. So I'd like to get your opinion on whether or not you feel it's getting easier. I think the consensus generally is to start up a business in Europe. But what are you seeing as the impact? Is it easier to get funding? I'd certainly like to hear from your side on this, Richard. And also, what are we seeing? Are we seeing a greater number of failure rates? Are we seeing a greater number of people having to go over to the US to get that second round funding to go on to that next step? So what are the shifts that you're seeing?
Sure. Well, we've just secured our seed funding here in the UK, and the way we've done that is we've accessed 3 pools. We didn't want to leave anything to chance, so we did a Crowdcube pitch, which raised 100,000, which was its target. We reached out to angel investors, and we received some funds from them, and we also have a VC on board as well. So we have 3 different pools that are kind of invested in us. So yeah, it's been relatively easy to get funding here in the UK. We only sort of really kind of pushed hard on it for about sort of 6 weeks, and we raised more than we wanted, which is great. I think for the next round we're going to go to Silicon Valley, and that's why we just took the move about a month ago to actually send Alex Foss, who's the CEO, over to go and sell the company as a US company, and to basically, because in Silicon Valley a seed round over there is $1 million, and they wouldn't bat an eyelid at $1 million. So it's much easier to get funding for an idea like this, which is working new technologies and is very scalable. But as Davor said, hopefully that will change going forward. It's quite interesting that we've had a good response here in the UK, but we still feel the need to go to Silicon Valley to kind of find those investors. But that won't mean we won't stop our activities over here and keep reaching out to people, but we will kind of go to Silicon Valley and get that next round from there, probably.
It's getting so much better. No, so I would say, from the different angles, maybe I feel like, for very early stage funding, there seem to be a number of schemes that maybe haven't been available before, the EIS schemes and such. I feel like there are kind of new ways of that I know startups have been able to access and get capital. I mean, the crowdfunding, etc. So I feel like, again, we're going through this renaissance of where, if you're not a good VC, I mean, you're gonna get disintermediated. I mean, that's just the fact. So in the early stages, it means that if you're a crappy seed investor, people will go with the crowdfunding platforms. People will go to AngelList and find someone in the US who is just as passionate about it. They'll go to Kickstarter and get kind of customers to invest in the business. And so I think that similarly for the later stage investments, again, great teams who have the ability to get on a plane, which by the way now anyone can. We'll go to the Valley and raise money if that is sort of the right thing for them to do. But I would just say, beyond kind of investing, and I feel like there's just a number of other trends that are really making it, better today to be an entrepreneur, and I think we see that in the numbers. One, in terms of the cost of startup. So, you can kind of launch a startup in a cloud with minimal costs. The hardware, the Moore's Law has made it, cheaper and cheaper to kind of launch a company. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that scaling companies today is any cheaper, because you have to acquire customers, and, Google is reporting record results. Well, someone has to pay for those Google AdWords, and oftentimes our startups suffer. But certainly in terms of getting something up and running, it feels like it's easier. I mean, the government is trying to help. I don't necessarily think governments will make or break the entrepreneurial environment, but certainly they could make it slightly easier. And then finally, I think this is probably the thing that I'm most excited about, is we're seeing more and more young people, great people, choosing the career of entrepreneurship over what maybe 5 years ago would have been a fantastic outcomes. You just said, I mean, case in point, people that had banking jobs, consulting jobs, corporate jobs. If I'm a case in point, I did a startup and I went to my father, who's a physics PhD and a professor, and I said, I set up a company, and he said, you're an idiot. What do you do with a Harvard MBA and McKinsey? What are you doing in doing a startup? And I think it still simply isn't cool enough in Europe for the best and the brightest to do startups. But I think that way is changing. And with the Entrepreneur First, which is an initiative, trying to get people from the best university in the UK to go and start companies right out of school when kind of the opportunity cost is lowest, all the way to kind of the Seed Camp and other initiatives. I do fundamentally believe that we will start to see more and more companies being, created by the best and the brightest. And without that, really, all these other things and, venture capital money and all that other stuff, clearly is an important input. But without great, people, we won't get much further.
Just make some brief comments on. I would say when you look at the startup community in London, it's quite different from, say, the last boom that we had. So it seems more tangible. One thing I would say, though, to match your comment around Silicon Valley is the level of ambition in Europe in general is just completely different to what you have in the US. What constitutes success is still a house in France or a house abroad, and perhaps a couple of horses. So it's not making $1 billion. So it's still not at that level. And I expect Silicon Valley will continue to attract the most finance and the most ambitious as well. So it may well be that in the next few months you emigrate. And it's just the way things are. And I don't see that culture changing in the short term. It may change in the medium term, and certainly the momentum towards London is quite distinct in terms of how it's growing and how it's attracting a lot of wealth. And also what I find fascinating is you can go a few hundred meters away and you've got the headquarters of a Spanish company, Telefonica, and their digital division is based in London. You've got Facebook investing heavily in London. You've got Google trying to be very ambitious around King's Cross. But a lot of the ambition is coming from the US and extending out into the UK. It's not coming from indigenous UK talent, I would say. Although the UK does seem to be attracting people from other countries, say Southern Europe, to come and try and make their fortune over here. So their duress is to our benefit.
Excellent. So I'd like to open up the floor to questions. So, gentlemen at the back, maybe do we have microphones, or should I think you could probably. Oh, you're fine. Yeah, you've got a loud voice. Perfect.
So you talked about how augmented reality and consumer sphere. What's the next biggest thing to shake up how we work?
Sorry, can you repeat the last bit of that? How we work in the office? Probably maybe having, I'm just throwing out ideas here, but I mean, we were talking in the office, we were like, wouldn't it be cool if you could have like, fixed points, you're sitting at a desk and you look up and you can see like a sort of, either your computer screen there in front of you, and you can see it when you need it, as it were. Maybe through augmented reality glasses, and you can see a much bigger computer screen and move things around more easily. There was a news report out the other day where someone was wearing kind of minority-style kind of glasses, which was pretty cool, and it actually works. You can like put your finger out there and touch, but it doesn't look very good. It looks very slow and sluggish, and it's got a long way to go, but people are making the sort of steps that way, and it won't take long before someone sits down and goes, okay, let's make this as quick and easy as possible. And it should be a case of months, not years. So we probably will see maybe, office efficiencies with augmented reality, probably starting with the tech companies first, but then moving more kind of mainstream into more kind of commercial, like other companies, basically. Probably start with, companies like Mind Candy or people within the gaming technology, because I just find it more productive and efficient. But yeah.
I think in terms of office technology, so one of the best, the reason why we're all here is because we're trying to exchange ideas. And so one of the challenges with large offices is it can be very hard to meet with people who you should meet with. And I think there should be technologies and algorithms out there which allow you to work out, or which calculate for you, who you should try and meet with. So there is a need to try and generate more of that serendipity in terms of meeting with people who have a piece of the puzzle which you're missing. And a lot of office design is trying to generate that. But you need, I think, more ways of trying to encourage that kind of meeting of minds.
I'm not an expert, but one of the things that always puzzles me still is why we all work the same way we worked for decades and centuries. And there's lots of kind of drawbacks that people talk about telework, and you have to be in the office by the water cooler, and but I was just thinking today with Google Glass, etc. I mean, I find myself being more and more productive in actually my downtime. Now that my wife would call that being not focused on not being at home and relaxing. But I find kind of, if I look at my productivity, it's relatively even, whether I'm at home, whether I'm at work. My email is now, available in 17 different tablets and PCs and mobile phones. And so I'm kind of getting inundated. So I was thinking today, just with the Google Glass, I mean, would I have to actually be in the office for 10 hours per day? I mean, could I actually just not interact with all my portfolio companies, with my entrepreneurs, with my colleagues, just kind of an ad hoc basis, like FaceTime through Google Glass, boom. It doesn't matter where I am, whether I actually have to do an errand with my family or not, and just kind of trying to blend I think the personal and the work life. I think that has a chance of actually disrupting the personal life, and I recognize that. But I certainly think, for example, when I go on vacation, I rarely come back to like the mountain of 7,000 emails anymore. Again, it feels good about it. I feel good about it. So maybe I should extend my vacation next time to another week.
Well, I, for what it's worth, I actually fully agree with that as well. I think it's really strange how we do most of our work, or at least I do, on my mobile phone and generally on my way home or in between whatever I'm doing at home in the evening. That my productivity is probably much higher out of the office or in between. So I live in Ireland. I flew over today. I was actually quite pleased I was flying over because I would have the most time to catch up on everything I was doing. And that's all because of mobile, right? On my way to this session today, not very much preparation, literally walking down the street, I'm reading the agenda, I'm going into LinkedIn, I'm having a look at Fidelity Partners, seeing what synergies we have, and that's all done in 20 minutes on my mobile phone. Now you take what's happening with wearable technology and with Google Glass and others, and you think about the number of times you look at your mobile phone. Now think about that being completely instant through wearable technology and things like Google Glass. That's a huge game changer and a great indicator. If you think when the iPhone came out, the ecosystem that built out was pretty much B2C. It was games, it was consumer-based apps. And then there was this massive proliferation of business apps onto the iPhone. And now the iPhone is a business device, right? It kind of merges with consumer-based life, but it's a business life, and I think business and consumer merged anyway. But you think about that and the number of times, I think it's almost in the hundreds that people look up data on their iPhone or their mobile device, and you think about the impact that an instant information device like Google Glass or something like that would have. I think that's huge. So that's where I think. I know that I'm not actually on the panel, but I think, yeah. Anyway, so any other questions? So let's go for this gentleman over here.
Sure. I'm quite interested as people thought with the iPad that it was just a bigger iPhone, so it wouldn't take off. Now we're going to have sort of wearable watches, wearable glasses. Which of these TVs are still doing well? Which of these technologies do you think will continue to do well alongside each other, and which ones are going to sort of cannibalize the other ones' markets? And think about wearable technology and smartphones, for example.
Do you want to start with that? And then I can... So, I mean, we've been looking at what's the impact of people starting going from, say, smartphones to tablets and already owning laptops. And what you tend to find is that each screen is optimized for different applications. So smaller screens work very well for short communications, reading things. And large screens with keyboards are very good for productivity. So it's very rare that you find people who can do an entire day without a keyboard unless they tend to be either the boss or else on the way out. So they are viewing and reviewing devices. That's what a tablet is. And other thing about tablets is that when the iPad came out, for about a year and a half, it had the market to itself. And it was an enterprise tool. Now what you're seeing now with tablets is the surge of the tablet as a toy. So it's replacing Nintendo's. Because you buy the device for about the same price, but the games are free until you see the credit card bill with all the virtual goods that you've bought. And I've spent a lot more money than I ever want to admit on enhancing my invincibility on trivial games. I spend hours and hours and hours playing. So, each of the screens has a different use. The new iPad Air, I think, is very significant in that it's a lot lighter. Because one of the challenges with the iPad was it's 750 grams. It's too heavy to carry around for most people if you also carry around a laptop. So, but what we're seeing is that people own as many devices as they can get away with. And so that's where you start to need to have the replication, and also that's one of the impacts which is going to be on connectivity. So there is overall, there is a finite amount of time that you've got, but people tend to be able to co-own devices so long as they are useful in some regards. And normally, it's usable screen area which determines what you use each for. So, watching television on tablets is fine if you can't watch on a big screen. So, one of the things that we've looked at is, say, in the living room, you often get, or you occasionally get, where there's a clash over what to watch. Someone watches a TV and someone else watches on a tablet, and it's almost always the male who ends up watching on the tablet, and it's often sports, except in Poland. I'll tell you later.
I think one of the pieces of research we found was that typically people spend about $2,000 or sort of £1,500 on sort of technology. So whether that be a MacBook, kind of computer, phone, or other kind of technology, that's about how much people spend on sort of their personal tech. So there's always going to be a bit of cannibalization, I think. But it will come down to essentially what the practicalities of it. I mean, Google Glass, I think, will be really useful in terms of when people go into the office, in terms of location, in terms of getting notifications and shifting through important ones and less important ones. I think people are always going to have phones and people will have tablets. But as people kind of get that information that they need and they get that practical use of it, then they may decide, well, actually, maybe my iPad or my isn't that relevant anymore, or in the same way that kind of iPads are maybe starting to kind of encroach on sort of PC sales a little bit. But yeah, I think there will always be cannibalization, but it'll come down to the core product and practicalities of it. And if there's enough practicalities behind a product like Google Glass, then people will buy it. And we think there's enough kind of practical reasons why people would get it, for traveling, for being more productive at home during your leisure time, and for hopefully sport as well. So, yeah.
I don't know, but personally, I feel like we have, personally and as a family, we have significantly increased our budget for these devices. I mean, probably we are on like 4 iPhones of different generations and 2 tablets and the MacBook, this one and that one, and I don't know. It seems like all also becoming Apple more and more. But so I feel like actually the technology has now become so important that actually the people are spending more. And if we said, look, an iPhone is going to cost, or a new iPad is going to cost 700 and something pounds, and there's a line outside of the Apple store, I feel like people are just really valuing that utility. In terms of kind of what's going to cannibalize what, I feel like there's still some standard use cases like watching television, but there's sort of emerging cases, and I actually don't even know what I'm going to use the watch for. But I'm sure someone's going to come up with some pretty good reason for me to own that watch. And, to almost kind of try and, estimate what it's going to be. And that's the beauty of these kind of marketplaces where, people can come up with apps and with location, with higher CPU, with better screens, with more connectivity, I actually don't even know what might be possible. So I certainly kind of have the mindset that when iPad came, I thought it was groundbreaking, but I certainly did not see the significance of that impact on the society. I mean, when you sit on a plane, just like look around you, and I mean, every person after takeoff has a tablet in their lap. I mean, that is just like probably 80+% penetration rate of tablets already in the demographic that flies regularly on a plane. So I don't exactly know what's going to cannibalize what, but I feel like we overall seem to be spending more on these technologies, and when the watch comes, I'm sure it's going to do well in of itself.
Can I just make one slight? I am bearish on watches. I don't think they will be a success because I think we're moving away from watches because the main purpose of a watch was to tell the time or for ostentation. And ostentation has moved to technology and telling the time has also moved to technology. So I think the watch is on its way out. I don't think smart watches will be a success from what we've looked at. And also, one other reality check is iPad sales are pretty flat year on year, and big iPad sales are down 50% year on year.
Right, so I'm not really sure where that leaves everybody at the moment. Yeah, so that probably doesn't answer the question fully, but some food for thought at least. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Yes, gentlemen at the back there.
A question really for Paul. You were speaking about the connected TVs, and I was just interested. They've been around for a while, and yet the app ecosystem doesn't really seem to have caught anyone's imagination. Every time I log in, I don't know, it's 1,000 apps or something like that, and it never really seems to be growing. Do you think that's kind of lost its way because the market's too fragmented and there are too many different platforms, or do you think it's kind of biding its time and there's still a groundswell of work to be done in that space?
I'd say in the short term, the app market for televisions is going to remain pretty small. So most of the apps which are used are basically shortcuts to additional content. So it's access to like iPlayer or to subscription VOD services. So that's all they are. But then in terms of what's the purpose of a television, it largely is to watch television. So even though you can use a television to do Facebook or other stuff like that, imagine the teenagers watching with their parents and showing their Facebook feeds on the screen. It won't go down very well. What works on a PC, which is personal, won't necessarily work, or on a tablet, won't necessarily work on a television set. So that's one reason why the apps are not that great. But also the apps which are out there, there's a chicken and egg situation in that they are not making very much money, and so there's not very much investment in them, and so they're pretty crap. So even stuff which is ported over, like there is, I think, Angry Birds you can get on Samsung TVs, and the experience on a tablet using swiping is a lot better than the experience that you've got when you're trying to use, say, even Connect, which is a fairly good movement recognition system. The great thing about connected TVs and apps, the only other great thing is you get a much better workout because you have to work a lot harder to do all the swiping. So I don't know, perhaps you can combine it with glass in some way for an optimized workout. But apart from that, there isn't anything particularly great I've found in terms of TV apps so far. And I'm sure there will be things coming in, but you'll have to wait until you have multi-screen systems before they start to come into their own.
Gentleman over here.
Yeah, so the question I have really is about the upcoming release in the gaming sphere, the release of Microsoft Xbox One, also the PlayStation 4. In terms of sales, I just wondered how much of an impact you see from mobile, iOS and mobile operating systems used as gaming, having an impact on those traditional consoles.
I think mobile devices are going to have a huge impact. You've already seen that with Angry Birds. It's one of the most successful games. I'm sure most people in this room have played Angry Birds at some point. I think with more traditional games that come out on Xbox, they will be big releases like GTA, like Call of Duty, games that are that take years in the making essentially and are really, really engaging. And they will still last, those big releases, because they are so absolutely amazing. They give the user an experience that you just can't get on a mobile device. You kind of get this whole world in GTA, for example, where you can do so many things, which is just unimaginable. Play stock market or whatever, it's crazy. But on a mobile device, you kind of get those games which are for people when they're traveling to work and just want to kind of pass some time and kind of relax. We see them kind of coinciding along each other. I think typically people are kind of getting more busy with their lives. They have more information than ever before. So people will kind of turn to more maybe short-term kind of pleasures such as mobile devices, and that's kind of why we're kind of getting into that sphere as well. It's because we think that people will have less time in their hands. That's a realistic kind of fact, I suppose. Maybe a sad one, but people will probably want to get that quick, simple kind of pleasure of playing a game rather than going back and spending an hour playing on say, on a console. So that we kind of see that trend going.
I would say just a couple of things. On the versus mobile, I think that there's a lot of people who would not call themselves gamers who play, casual games on mobile. So, probably if you play Call of Duty, on a console, you're probably highly unlikely to be, the most passionate player of Angry Birds, or at least if you do, it's probably coming from a different time in your day or a different time, different need. That being said, my understanding is, iPhone 4 is probably was as in terms of capabilities was roughly kind of on a PS3 level. So in terms of the kind of capabilities that phones are offering, I feel like it's getting better and better and better to the point where, how much more can you offer? The reality is you can still offer more, right? In terms of experience, it seems like it's getting to really kind of almost like a real life experience on the console. So there certainly is a demographic. It certainly are titles where you can kind of offer that to players. And my understanding, actually, the PS4 isn't that much better in terms of capabilities that it could be. It's trying to kind of manage the unit price and attract a broader audience. And then offer all the things that mobile phones offer, connectivity, etc. So I certainly agree that there will be cannibalization, but I also feel like one of the things that we have seen on mobile, actually, gaming has taken market share from other media like reading news or doing other things. It's just kind of pastime. So I do think that we'll still see some hits on PS4 and such.
So if you look back at what happened with the last generation of launches, PS3 was aimed at was presented as a convergence device, so entertainment and games, and you see how that did. And the Xbox 360 was focused as a gaming device, and I think it did relatively better. This time round, the PS4 is more of a pure games playing device aimed at core gamers. And the thing is, that market isn't that big. It never has been that big. So when you compare the sales of consoles over a 5-year period to the sales of televisions or computers, it's a surprisingly small market. But it's one which gets a lot of attention because everyone at some time has played a game. But the time spent playing console-based games is not that great. So if you're very good at playing games, you will tend to burn through them in about 10 hours. If you're not good at playing games, after about 10 hours you give up. So the games market is not that great, and I don't think it overlaps that much with the casual games that you play on mobile phones. Where it does actually intrude is with the more casual games consoles, which are like the Wii, and then the upgrade to that, which hasn't done very well. So that's where I see where the major competition is. In terms of processing capability, if you want to see what a console can actually do, play a console on a television and look at the graphics, then try doing mirroring from a phone, say even the iPhone 5S, and look at how it looks on a 40-inch screen, and you'll be upset at the pixelation. So that will give an idea of what the actual graphics capability is.
Sign up to the next event now and experience this for yourself. For more information, visit our website, firsttuesday.org.uk.